I was suing Will for $200 million because that video is going to be there forever. You do not have the right to walk up on stage and smack somebody in the face because they said words.
Oh, wow. Wow.
The incident itself lasted only seconds, but what came after revealed something far deeper than just a single lapse in control. When Will Smith walked back to his seat after striking Chris Rock live on television, the room didn't freeze, it shifted. The show carried on, laughter returned, and before the night was over, that same man was standing on stage again, soaking in a long, thunderous standing ovation. That wasn't confusion, it was conditioning. In that room sat the industry's power core, executives, producers, agents, and financiers, people whose entire success depends on stability and familiar, profitable faces. In that split second, the question wasn't whether a line had been crossed, but whether admitting it would threaten the system that had protected and profited from him for nearly 3 decades. For almost 30 years, Will Smith had been the safest kind of star, polished, bankable, and endlessly marketable. His films pulled in billions, and his image was built with care, flawless, family-friendly, and carefully managed. But when that slap landed, that image shattered right in front of millions. Yet the applause that followed showed Hollywood's first instinct: protect the brand, contain the fallout, and keep the show going. Live television doesn't allow filters or edits, no retakes, no publicists to control the story. What audiences saw that night wasn't just one shocking act. It was an industry showing its true reflexes when reputation and profit crash into each other. That moment became more than a scandal. It forced everyone to confront the quiet rules that have shaped Hollywood for decades. Accountability suddenly felt optional, while power remained untouchable. Once that imbalance was exposed, it cracked open a door that had been sealed for years, finally giving a voice to those who had watched in silence, ignored and dismissed for far too long. The first real fracture in Hollywood's silence came from someone who had nothing to gain by speaking up: Jim Carrey.
I was sickened. I was sickened by the standing ovation. I felt like Hollywood is just spineless, en masse. And it really felt like, oh, this is a really clear indication that we're not the cool club anymore.
He wasn't promoting a film, chasing headlines, or seeking a comeback. He spoke as an insider who had seen the system from the inside for decades and had finally stopped feeling the need to protect it. When Carrey said he was sickened by what he saw, he wasn't just referring to Will Smith. He was talking about the room's reaction, the standing ovation, the smiles, the applause instead of accountability. It all confirmed what Carrey had sensed for years. Hollywood had shifted from principles to pure optics. That applause wasn't forgiveness, it was armor, a shield to protect the image, not the integrity, and Carrey's words hit differently because of who he was. In the 1990s, he redefined stardom by doing the unexpected, embracing absurdity, rejecting fake polish, and refusing to play by the old leading man rules. Over time, that defiance became something deeper, something almost philosophical. Carrey started to question fame itself, claiming that celebrity personas were manufactured masks, trapping those who wore them too long. That idea framed how he saw the Oscars moment. To him, the slap wasn't about love or honor. It was about an identity in crisis. A carefully crafted public image, built, sold, and worshipped for decades, suddenly felt exposed for what it was. And when that illusion was threatened in front of millions, the reaction was instant and explosive. Carrey called it an avatar, a false self desperate for validation, and the more powerful it becomes, the harder it is to escape. From that mindset, any perceived attack feels like a threat to existence itself. The outburst wasn't planned, it was pressure that had been building for years finally exploding in public. What disturbed Carrey most wasn't the slap, it was how smoothly the industry absorbed it. No pause, no discomfort, no real consequence in that moment. Just applause and business as usual. To him, that wasn't resilience. It was proof that Hollywood had lost its moral compass, unwilling or unable to stand for anything beyond protecting its own power. While Jim Carrey analyzed the chaos like a philosopher cracking open a flawed system, Eddie Murphy chose a different approach: silence. For years, Murphy stepped away from Hollywood's endless spotlight. He didn't campaign for awards, didn't hang around at ceremonies, and refused to play the visibility game that fame now demands. His absence became its own statement, making his return impossible to ignore. When Murphy finally walked onto the Golden Globe stage to accept the Cecil B. DeMille Award, the energy in the room shifted. Everyone felt the weight of it.
It's very simple. There's three things you just do. These three things. Pay your taxes, mind your business, and keep Will Smith's wife's name.
This was a man who had spent decades calling out the artificial glow of award shows, describing them as rooms full of people pretending to be versions of themselves for applause. And yet, here he was, accepting an honor he couldn't realistically turn down. Then came his line, calm but sharp. Pay your taxes, mind your business, and keep Will Smith's wife's name out of your mouth. The crowd burst into laughter, but beneath that laughter was tension. Everyone understood exactly what he meant. It wasn't a punchline, it was a line in the sand. Murphy later clarified that his words weren't meant for shock, they were a reminder, a quiet declaration of an old truth that comedians live by. Jokes are meant to challenge, not to harm. When that boundary is crossed, the rules change for everyone. Coming from Eddie Murphy, one of the true architects of modern stand-up and film comedy, the message hit with undeniable force. What made that moment powerful wasn't just the sly jab at Will Smith, but the weight of who said it. Murphy had no agenda, no movie to plug, no image to protect, and no reason to charm the industry. His legacy was already secure in Hollywood history, and that freedom gave his words serious weight. In one short sentence, Murphy did what nearly everyone else in the business had avoided since that Oscars night. He acknowledged the incident, dismissed the excuses, and kept it moving without drama. And in doing so, he exposed something striking, how rare it had become for insiders to speak plainly when reputation, money, and influence were on the line.
Yeah, that was a horrific night, as you can imagine. At the end of the day, I lost it, and I guess what I would say, you just never know what somebody's going through. It was a lot of things. It was the little boy that watched his father beat up his mother. It's all of that just bubbled up in that moment.
To really grasp why Murphy's words landed so deeply, you have to see what award shows have turned into. They're not neutral celebrations of talent. They're stage productions where image, optics, and financial interests collide under the glow of studio lights. Every angle, every laugh, every applause cue, it's all calculated. Truth isn't the goal, stability is. The entire awards ecosystem depends on everyone silently agreeing to play along. Winners thank their teams, losers smile gracefully, and controversy gets smoothed over or quietly delayed until it can be handled behind closed doors. The Oscars moment shattered that illusion, not just because a violent act happened, but because it unfolded unscripted, live, and completely outside the industry's control. The standing ovation for Will Smith wasn't compassion. It was Hollywood performing damage control in real time. By applauding, the room rewrote the narrative, shifting the scene from misconduct to redemption. It let the show keep rolling and reassured studios, investors, and advertisers that nothing had truly unraveled. That's why Murphy's quiet one-liner at the Golden Globes carried more impact than any formal statement could. He didn't demand punishment, didn't moralize, didn't feed the outrage machine. He simply drew a clear boundary that everyone had been pretending didn't exist. And with that, he revealed how unnatural the silence around the whole thing had become. The contrast between those two nights was sharp and unforgettable. At the Oscars, restraint vanished, and accountability disappeared right along with it. At the Golden Globes, a single joke served as a soft correction, a subtle acknowledgement that a line had been crossed, even if no one dared to say it outright. Because in the end, award shows thrive on one illusion above all, the illusion of moral authority. Award shows love to present themselves as guardians of culture and excellence. But moments like these expose the truth. They're not temples of art. They're marketplaces of influence. Behavior gets judged not by ethics, but by risk. What's profitable to punish and what's safer to ignore. And once that reality shows itself, all the polished speeches and thunderous applause start to feel hollow. When audiences finally recognize the performance for what it is, a well-rehearsed illusion, the power of the ceremony starts to crumble. And that slow erosion, more than any single outburst or joke, is what Hollywood truly fears. The conversation shifts when you look past the bright stage lights and into how private pain gets rebranded for public entertainment. Red Table Talk became the clearest example of how vulnerability, when carefully packaged, turns into a business strategy.
To our cover story, Jada Pinkett Smith and Will Smith got candid on Red Table Talk, confirming that Jada had a relationship with another man when the duo was separated. Take a look.
So that's what we're going to start with. This is a very personal journey.
Yeah.
That became very public.
I think you need to say clearly what happened.
Yeah, and then I got into an entanglement with August. That's what I said.
An entanglement?
Yes. Yes.
A relationship?
Yes, it was a relationship.
I wasn't sure I was ever going to speak to you again.
I know.
Yeah, like the fact that I'm speaking to you again is a miracle.
What looked like emotional honesty was, in truth, a calculated production. When Jada Pinkett Smith opened up about her connection with August Alsina, the delivery was everything: the soft lighting, the intimate tone, the confessional setup. And sitting at the center of it all was Will Smith, not portrayed as part of the storm, but as the calm within it, the forgiving figure rising above the chaos. The storytelling was meticulous, every emotion acknowledged, every reaction contained. Control never left the table. Instead of hurting Will Smith's image, that episode flipped the script. It shifted focus, replaced scrutiny with sympathy, and turned what could have been a damaging revelation into a redemption arc. By presenting himself as the heartbroken husband choosing grace, Smith regained moral footing in a situation that could have easily stripped it away. This is exactly where Jim Carrey's point about constructed identities comes back into play. That conversation wasn't just about marriage, it was about maintaining brand identity. The audience was invited into something that looked raw and real, but every boundary was planned, every message deliberate. The mess was visible, but the ending was already written. For many, it became entertainment, not reflection. Clips flooded social media, memes took over, and the seriousness of the confession turned into digital spectacle. While the world fixated on the emotional reveal, tougher discussions about power, control, and accountability quietly vanished from view. Red Table Talk wasn't the first to blur those lines. It was just the most transparent about it. It showed that in modern celebrity culture, scandal isn't avoided anymore. It's managed, monetized, and, when done right, transformed into a moment of influence. Hollywood doesn't just survive scandal, it absorbs it, repackages it, and sells it back to the public. Pain turns into content, accountability becomes negotiable, and whoever controls the story decides who walks away tarnished and who gets a redemption arc. By the time the Oscars incident exploded, this playbook was already worn in. Audiences had been conditioned to consume personal chaos without ever expecting closure. And that conditioning? It didn't start on a stage. It started at a table. Long before the Oscars and before the world tuned in to televised confessions, there were early warnings about how power really worked behind the curtain. One of the clearest examples unfolded during the original run of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. At the center was Janet Hubert, the original Aunt Viv, the woman who gave the show its emotional backbone and authority. But after 3 seasons, she was suddenly gone, erased from the story. The official explanation came fast, and it stung. She was painted as difficult, unprofessional, and hard to work with. It was a narrative Hollywood had perfected, quick, damaging, and nearly impossible to fight. When Daphne Maxwell Reid stepped in to replace her, the show carried on like nothing happened. The story was sealed and forgotten. Years later, Hubert finally gave her side. She said the fallout wasn't about ego, it was about business. A contract dispute, not defiance. According to her, she pushed back against what she believed were unfair terms, and that resistance was punished.
I could not do a 30-year celebration of this show and not celebrate you.
Very abusive marriage.
You know, I have children.
Yeah.
I've been divorced and have a second marriage, and I can see now the level of pain and the level of struggle that it was for you just to show up every day.
Once negotiations broke down, the machine moved swiftly, and instead of standing by her, Will Smith aligned with the version of events that kept the show clean and his image untouched. The impact was brutal. Hubert lost work, credibility, and momentum almost overnight. In Hollywood, the label of difficult can be a career death sentence. And for a dark-skinned black woman, the damage was multiplied. That accusation didn't just end a job, it rewrote her entire professional story. What makes that moment echo today is how familiar it feels, how perfectly it fits the same old pattern. Control the narrative, protect the image, preserve stability, no matter who gets hurt in the process. Once those in power agree on a version of the truth, it becomes the only truth. And even decades later, when the cast finally reunited, that tension didn't just vanish, it lingered in the air, visible and heavy, a reminder of how Hollywood handles its unfinished business. Janet Hubert finally spoke openly about the harm that had been done and about the silence that helped it happen. That moment wasn't really about reconciliation, it was about acknowledgement, a long overdue admission that success in Hollywood has never been shared equally, and that the price of fame is often paid unevenly. Looking back, the Aunt Viv controversy wasn't some isolated feud. It was a warning sign. It revealed exactly how influence operates when one voice outweighs another, and how quickly uncomfortable truths can be rewritten when protecting the brand becomes the real priority. By the time Will Smith rose to full blockbuster power, the usual rules barely applied to him anymore. One of the clearest examples came during the Men in Black 3 shoot in New York City, a moment that showed just how far that privilege stretched. Even though Smith owned property in the city, he requested an enormous double-decker trailer to be stationed near the filming site.
It's big, it's awesome. I mean, it's Will Smith. What do you expect?
If you're making a movie, you're making a movie. But don't move your gym in here. Don't move your, it's about 6 times the size of a mobile home. It's insanity. Look at the size of that thing. I mean, how can you come walk a few blocks like everyone else and book a room in a hotel or something? You know what I'm saying?
It's crazy. It's all on Mercer Street and then down Broome Street and down here it's blocking. There's nobody can park. There's no traffic coming through. It's awful. It's obscene. It's Will Smith and he's got a gym supposedly. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Who the fuck is he?
This wasn't a simple on-set trailer. It was a full-scale fortress on wheels, stretching over 50 feet long, complete with a private gym, luxury amenities, and a reported cost in the millions. Parked right in the middle of a busy Soho block, it blocked streets, rattled storefronts, and pumped exhaust into the neighborhood. Residents complained, city officials got involved, and still, nothing changed. The production kept rolling, and the trailer stayed exactly where it was. What made it so striking wasn't the luxury itself. Hollywood thrives on excess. It was the refusal to bend, the sense that ordinary rules just didn't apply. Smith had options. There were nearby hotels. He even had his own apartment, just blocks away. But none of that mattered. The assumption seemed clear. The inconvenience of others was simply the price of accommodating his comfort. When public frustration started to surface, it was handled quietly, smoothed over, managed out of sight. The story never reached scandal status, no apology was issued, and once filming wrapped, the massive trailer simply vanished. But the message it left behind was impossible to ignore. In Hollywood, when someone becomes valuable enough, disruption becomes acceptable. That kind of privilege doesn't appear overnight. It's built slowly, reinforced through years of special treatment and unspoken exceptions. Each accommodation sets a new standard. Each overlooked moment of excess becomes the norm. And over time, the line between professional necessity and personal entitlement fades until it's nearly invisible. Looking back, the trailer controversy fits perfectly into a much bigger pattern. It was never just about a trailer or a street. It was about boundaries and how easily they can dissolve when power goes unchecked. When an industry decides that someone is too important to challenge, that mindset spreads fast. And once it's rooted, it doesn't stay confined to a single set or situation. Because when that protective shield around a public figure begins to crack, stories that were once whispered quietly start resurfacing. That shift doesn't automatically make every claim true, but it changes how people listen and how willing they are to question the official story. In Will Smith's case, that moment came fast. After the Oscars incident, a wave of renewed curiosity swept through his past, bringing forward names and claims that had long faded from public memory. One of the most discussed voices in this resurgence was Bilal Salam, a former associate who, years after their working relationship ended, shared accounts describing personal situations that, if accepted at face value, clashed with the image Smith had spent decades building. These statements remain unverified and should be viewed as allegations, not conclusions, but their persistence is telling. Assistants and close insiders often occupy a rare position. They see the unfiltered side of fame, the part audiences never witness, and once those relationships end, loyalty and silence aren't guaranteed anymore. Around the same time, artist Jaguar Wright also spoke out, claiming that inappropriate behavior occurred within elite celebrity spaces, often disguised as mentorship. Her remarks too are unproven and widely disputed, but they echoed a growing theme, accusations that question not just individual behavior, but the culture of secrecy that has long shielded powerful figures. Even earlier, the late Alexis Arquette made public comments suggesting that certain parts of Will Smith's private life were deliberately hidden to protect his marketability. Her words came during a time when Hollywood was far less accepting of any deviation from the images it worked so hard to craft. None of these claims were ever substantiated, and they must be approached with caution. But taken together, they highlight a consistent truth about the entertainment business. Image management has always come first. Studios once operated like fortresses, guarding their stars from any narrative that could threaten box office power. Individually, these stories don't amount to proof, but collectively, they reveal how much effort goes into protecting reputations in an industry built on illusion. What really matters isn't that the rumors existed, it's why they survived this long. For years, they floated around the edges of conversation, dismissed as idle talk. But after the Oscars, everything changed. The illusion of untouchability cracked, and with that break came a rare willingness to look closer, to question stories that had once been off limits. That's the real cost of building an image that refuses to bend, because when pressure finally breaks it, everything that's been buried rushes to the surface all at once. Truth and speculation collide, and suddenly the line between the two blurs beyond recognition. That confusion isn't random. It's the natural outcome of a system that values preservation over honesty. After the Oscars, the fallout didn't come in a single wave. It arrived quietly, in the form of distance rather than public outrage. Will Smith wasn't erased from Hollywood, but the certainty that once surrounded his name faded fast. Projects stalled, appearances slowed, and the enthusiasm that used to follow him everywhere turned cautious and cold. The release of Emancipation was meant to mark a comeback, a film wrapped in history, suffering, and moral weight. In another era, it might have been celebrated as proof of his depth and durability. But now it arrived shadowed by context, watched through skeptical eyes. Audiences weren't seeing the actor, they were seeing the story behind him. The box office struggled, awards buzz fizzled, and the energy felt uncertain. This wasn't punishment, it was hesitation. Studios and investors hadn't suddenly discovered principles. They had discovered risk. For the first time in decades, Will Smith wasn't the safest choice in the room. The trust that his name once guaranteed was gone, replaced by quiet calculations about image and controversy. The irony couldn't be clearer. The same industry that had applauded him hours after the slap was now keeping him at arm's length, not because of moral awakening, but because controversy complicates marketing. In Hollywood, silence is often the smoothest way to manage chaos, and this time, that silence spoke volumes. But what truly shifted wasn't the industry, it was the audience. Viewers who once accepted the polished version of Will Smith without question began to see through it. They noticed the performance behind the performance. Little things that would have passed unnoticed before were now dissected, replayed, and reinterpreted. The distance between the persona and the person grew wider, harder to ignore. And for someone whose entire career had been built on universal likability, that gap hit harder than any public backlash. When trust erodes, even slightly, it changes everything. Scripts read differently, speeches sound rehearsed, apologies feel like strategy, not sincerity. The Oscars didn't destroy a career, they ended an era where image outweighed truth, where protection was guaranteed, and where reputation was untouchable. Once that bubble burst, Will Smith faced something entirely new, not cancellation, but exposure. For the first time in 30 years, there was no narrative left to hide behind, and no system rushing to rebuild it for him. So now the question is yours. Was this just one breaking point, or the moment a carefully constructed image finally collapsed under its own weight? Let's talk about it. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, share this video, And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that Hollywood doesn't want told.